Okay, what we got here today is an attempt by me to do what I can to get some information out there that might save a life or stop somebody from getting hurt. We keep getting these stories on the news about kids accidentally shooting themselves or people accidentally shooting their friends or family. And it comes down to simple negligence for the most part when it isn't just some anger issue that somebody just goes off and does something stupid with a gun intentionally. I'm just strictly talking about the accidents. So understand, this is not me instructing you on how to use a gun. This is not me following a pro-gun agenda. I'm not encouraging you to go buy a gun. That's not what this is about. This is strictly about how people unintentionally end up shooting themselves out of just ignorance about guns. A lot of people think they know what they are. Most people think guns are fairly simple, and I'm about to dispel that rumor or misconception that's out there. So I'm going to start with revolvers and show you how easy it is to get yourself in trouble if you're not careful. So first off, let's follow the 3 rules of gun safety. Rule number 1, guns are always loaded. I just checked all of these guns just before starting this video, but in my mind, I have trained myself to always consider them to be loaded so that if I pick these guns up, even though I've just checked them, I'm going to assume they're loaded and I'm going to check them again. And I make that a habit. I make that a practice so that I never get into the mode of picking up a gun and assuming it's not loaded. So rule number 1, they're always loaded. Rule number 2, when handling a gun, never put your finger on the trigger until you're on target and you know what you're shooting and you know what's behind what you're shooting. So very important. You're going to send a bullet down range at more than 1,000 feet per second, and that can go all the way up to over 4,000 feet per second depending on what you're shooting. That's probably going to go through the paper target or whatever you're using as a target and keep traveling for it. Some of them can go more than a mile or 2. So you need to make sure that when you're out plinking and you're out just shooting targets, or someone hands you a gun at a range or out in the field somewhere, that you make sure you know what's behind the target. So, but you keep your finger off the trigger until you have the gun up, have it targeted, have your target on sight, you know what's behind it, then you put your finger on the trigger, you pull the trigger, and when you're done shooting, you take your finger back off the trigger and then you put the gun down. And then that leads us to rule number 3. Never point the gun in a direction of something that you're not willing to destroy or kill. So even if you know it's not loaded, you still don't point that gun at someone or something that you're not willing to destroy. So 3 rules. They're always loaded, finger off the trigger, pointed in a safe direction. Okay, with all that said, I'm going to show you what's tripping people up with handguns, and this is about revolvers. I guess I should go ahead and explain basically what constitutes a revolver. They're typically going to have this shape, and the whole concept of the revolver, and I'll start with this guy here, is a round cylinder, and we'll go ahead and check it and make sure it's safe. This particular one has a little door here that you pull down, and you rotate the cylinder to see if each cylinder is empty. And that little revolving action you're seeing there, it constitutes that's a revolver. That's what it's about. You got a little mechanism that with this particular gun, when I pull the hammer back, it rotates or revolves the cylinder, and hence revolver. So here's what gets people in trouble. This particular gun, if you know this gun, and you know you're not really into guns, but you happen to know about how this is what the old cowboy 6-shooters, this is how they worked. And you had a hammer that you pull back, and then you pull the trigger. You cannot fire this gun just by pulling the trigger if that hammer isn't back. So if you know how this one works, and you think that all revolvers work like this, that, hey, unless I pull that back, it's not going to fire. Well, guess what? Looks very similar. But if you pull this guy up, and see, you'd have to check it even a different way. See how that swung out? It wasn't a door on this side. There's a little latch there, and that's how most revolvers are, but not all. But you pull that open, and you can see there are no bullets in this gun. But remember single action mode? Pull the hammer back, fire the gun. Guess what? If you pick this up thinking you're holding on to this guy, and you remember, hey, it's single action, it won't fire. Well, guess what? Yes, it will. This is a double action, that's double action, and a single action revolver. So if you pick it up thinking that it's that gun and you didn't check to see if it was loaded and it had bullets in it and you pull that trigger playing a joke, boom, just fired this gun. All right. Now, another trait of revolvers, let's throw this in there. Typically, they don't have safeties. There are some that do, but for the most part, revolvers do not come with safeties. Okay? So, moving now to the next type of gun. If you're familiar with those, and you come along and you grab this guy, you're going to say, okay, got a revolver. There's a little latch on the side. Check, make sure it's empty. All right, I got a revolver here, and, well, it's a little different. It doesn't have a hammer. This is a hammerless gun, or a shrouded hammer gun, right? So, basically, it is a double action only. Little mechanism in there that strikes the bullet. You can only shoot this firearm by pulling the trigger. You don't get to put it in a single action mode like that. And that's basically how this is designed. That's made for concealment. You can put it in a pocket and it doesn't snag or anything. All right, well, look how similar this one looks to it. This one's a bobbed hammer gun, so you do actually have a little hammer that you can see there, but it's been cut down so that it doesn't snag. All right. And check it, it's fine. But the problem is, you actually can manage to pull this trigger back, okay? The problem with this gun, though, it's a double action only gun, so when I go to let that go like I did with those first two, it fires. So you can understand how that could trick someone who thinks, hey, this one only works if I pull that back, but it won't fire until I pull that trigger, so I'm safe. Boom, it fires, okay? So, now you understand they're more complex than they look. They can easily get you into trouble if you don't know what you're dealing with. So the rule of thumb is don't mess with a firearm that you have not been sufficiently trained on. You need to read the manuals, you need to take instruction, you need to practice the safety habits, you need to use the gun as it's intended, and hopefully you won't end up falling for some of the traps that get people shot and killed. All right. Hope this helps. I'm going to do another one dealing with semi-automatics, which is a little entirely different animal and probably gets more people shot than revolvers do. So I hope this helps.